What you're looking at here is a Genco Pinball table leg, which I've painted black. That's the colour they were originally. I didn't have any black paint, but my mother died on Christmas Eve. Oh, she picked her timing to go. If I ever catch up with her, I shall mention that, because you know, if you're going to pick up a body, it costs you more on Christmas Eve because it's out of hours. So, and we always had that kind of relationship, my mother and I. I'll have to tell you this story while it's in my head. Some years ago, she was in hospital. She had an anaphylactic shock to a bee sting. Very allergic to them, and it was touch and go whether she'd make it. And I went to the hospital with my sister. My sister was very upset because she said, "Well, will she survive?" I said, "Well, knowing her, yeah, just to spite us." And that was the relationship I had with my mother. But when I arrived on the ward, she was down at the far end on one of these beep, beep machines, you know. And I shouted down the end of the ward. I said, "Well, I wish you'd make up your mind whether you're going to go or not." And this little feeble voice came back and said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I've got the funeral caterers going round the block not knowing whether to stop or not." And she said, "Well, you could always freeze them." I said, "Not bloody tomato, you can't." And the nurse said, "Are you two always like this?" I went, "Oh, yeah." And I have to say, because we were like that and very open about life and death, I was expecting her to die because she was quite ill. She had quite a tumble and she had a couple of strokes. She didn't really recover from it very well, and she was in a nursing home. And then just before Christmas, she contracted COVID, and I was kind of relieved in a way because she didn't really know what was going on. And I don't feel sad about her passing because, as she said to me once, she said, "There's nothing left unsaid between us, is there?" And I said, "No." And I would advise anybody, you know, be open. It doesn't, you know, particularly your family, tell them you love them. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or not, you know, just do it, because there are too many people that say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that." And then, of course, when the person dies, they're left with all this sort of guilt of things that they should have said. It's silly. Birth is as significant as death is. And she was a lovely lady, and certainly a lot of her personality is in me. Anyway, painting these legs, and this is the paint I used. The brand's immaterial actually, but we've got Wicks here in the UK. But what it is, it's a quick drying interior floor paint, and I found this in their house because they painted all the upstairs floors and the stairs. I don't quite know why. Didn't have any carpets, and they just painted it with this black stuff. And ebonising is what they call it, which basically means painting it black. I wouldn't choose that myself. I did similar on my stairs, except I did mine grey. But it is kind of nice because you don't get all that dust. You can just wipe it down, you know. So anyway, but I thought floor paint, that's going to be hard wearing enough. And this is exactly the same colour and finish that the legs were, except now they're not chipped. Anyway, welcome to Ralph's house. I live in Coventry in the UK, and if you live outside the United Kingdom, it's virtually smack bang in the middle. So if you put a pin in, that's roughly where I am. But anyway, my son had to go into town, so I said, "Look, nip into the works and get me some acrylic paints," which he did. But there's a deep red one in there. Well, I thought, gosh, that looks close to that. So let's put some on my finger. I'll just take these for reference. See what I mean? That's without a brush. That's almost a perfect match. I hit lucky there, I think. Yeah, and I'll just be able to just touch up round in places. And probably I can do the same on the playfield if need be. But I think, you know, you see this wood surround, that's actually screwed to the playfield. At some point I'm going to have to get that off, get that sanded down and varnished, same as I've done with this. This has come out really well actually, it's a nice wood. But yeah, acrylic paints. A lot of people who restore pinballs say use acrylic. It's a lot less mess, I must admit. Well, I'm burning the candle at several ends. I usually do. This is in the early hours of the morning again. And if you've been watching the restoration of this Genco, and I'm not a pinball restoration expert, not by any means. I'm just a good all-rounder, and I have a reasonable grasp of electronics. But as I say, most of this is electromechanical, so it's a mix of the two. Rather nice, I think. But I've got to get to grips with this power supply, otherwise we're not going to power anything, and we're not going to be able to tell what's working and what's not. The board looks pretty well intact, apart from I've got this stray wire going around the back that doesn't seem to go anywhere, and I can't even work out where it's meant to go. And also, a lot of it is joined with this old GPO tape, and the insulation's gone on that bit behind. So I'm going to have to, well, at least wrap that in insulation tape, but figure out where it goes on the back of this and what it's for. Anyway, we'll set that aside for a minute, because this is the Genco power supply. Now, rumour has it, and I say rumour because there are no circuit diagrams for these other than those that have been drawn subsequently. But what I'm told is that the bulbs on the board are powered by 6-volt AC, different, and the board is powered by 18 volts DC. So, and the 18 volts is questionable. I'm going to try it on 12 volt because I've got a 12 volt 30 amp supply. I think it'll run on that, but we will see. What I do know is these two wires that come in here, and this is really, really brittle stuff. Look at the state of that. That's the 240 volt into the transformer, right? We know that. So this side of the transformer is going to be the output. There are two wires at the top that come out of the transformer. There are two wires at the bottom. But the one at the bottom, there's another wire here with GPO tape on it, goes straight into the board. So my guess is, well, I think it's a certainty, because it's AC, it's not going through this rectifier, remember, that's AC, I'm going to bet that's 6 volt, that's a 6 volt tapping. So we've isolated, yeah, that's the 6 volt. This other one that comes from the bottom is grounded out up here on this terminal, and so is this other wire. So I think that's the grounding for the 6 volt and the grounding for the 18 volt, if it is 18 volt. So therefore this wire, which comes out here, is going to be the 18 volt supply for the board, and we will soon know, because I'll be able to follow that. So what I'll do, and bear in mind I'm working without a diagram, first of all I'm going to cut the supply to that. I'll snip it off, and I'll disconnect the wires to the rectifier, because I'm not going to be using this transformer. I'm going to put it back because it came with the machine and it's authentic and it looks right. I'll get all that, but I'm going to be using a modern supply and bypass this. My friend Graham, Radio Cruncher, if you haven't seen Graham's channel, go and watch on Sundays. He's really good. If you like fixing stuff, he's the guy to watch, especially retro stuff. Yeah, now he said, why don't you use a transformer? And yeah, I could do. In fact, I've got a transformer here. And what I could do is just replace this selenium rectifier with diodes, or a complete bridge rectifier. That could be the way to go. In fact, I might do it later on. I don't know. But in the shorter term, to get everything powered up, I'm going to run it off a switched 12 volt power supply. And if that works out okay, I'll keep with that. Because I'm thinking, well, we've got 6 volt AC and 18 volt DC. Why don't we just go all DC 12 volt, replace all the bulbs in it with 10mm LED bulbs. And just to remind you, I have compared the two and they put out exactly the same light. Yeah, I know there's going to be a few purists out there who think, oh, sacrilege, put the original bulbs in. Yeah, it's all right, but they're getting harder to find. The bulb sockets on this board are not particularly good. And I'd rather have everything on the same voltage. It just makes it so much easier. So, that's what I'm going to be doing in the morning. I'm going to disconnect this bridge rectifier. I am going to connect this to the mains on a fuse. Probably a 5 amp would do, 3 amp even, just to protect it. I'll measure it first. I'll put an ohm meter on it, make sure we haven't got a dead short or an open circuit, and just see what these voltages are. But I would bet any money that's going to be 6 or 7 volts. It'll be a little bit higher than its suggested voltage of 6. Well, I think it's 6.5 volts. So without being under load, it's perhaps maybe 7 or even 8 volts. We'll know then that that's the supply for the bulbs. That makes life an easy one. And we'll know which one is the 18 volt, which I say I'm going to replace with 12 volt. Yeah, bit of a challenge, isn't it? But I feel a little bit more confident now, having figured that out. I know through looking at articles on the net that people have restored Gencos and aren't particularly into electrics. You know, struggled a bit in terms of putting in a modern bridge rectifier, but I'm just going to put in whole power supply because my biggest priority really is getting everything going. Certain things I've got to check. You know, I've got this sort of stuff. It's a bit, you know, bare ends, that sort. They're all meant to be tied together. That's correct. This also had GPO tape on it, but it's connection to one of these solenoids. So I just want to make these all right and check that none of them are actually corroded. So these are in really good condition. These, some of them are actually bare metal, almost coat angle wire. That's for the bulbs. Yeah, and just I also disconnected the switch that's in the timer, which, you know, turns off all the bulbs. Well, it may even turn off the whole game. I'm going to remove that entirely and reroute the mains. That's the original fuse, which is blown. But now I know where the AC comes in, I can run some new cable for the mains, make that nice and tidy, make it modern colours as well. You know, brown and blue, so everybody knows what's what. And if I do need to, like, I could actually cover the mains cable, because I've got some black silicon braided stuff that looks very like this, so it'll hide the brown and the blue anyway, so it doesn't look quite so garish. But yeah, really pleased. So I've made progress on the power supply. We now know what we're doing. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.